Good morning. This is the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Outlook from Tuesday, August the 4th through Friday, August the 7th. Okay, so here's our low pressure system that has come up from the northeast Gulf of Mexico, the one that brought all those torrential rains to northern and central and northern Florida on the Gulf side. It has finally lifted out of the area and is heading northeast. It's somewhere over St. Helena Sound, Soundish in South Carolina now, and it's heading off to the northeast. Now, model guidance brings it up to coastline, and then eventually it heads out over the coast into the Atlantic. And I do think it'll join up the tail end of this boundary and scoot on out further out into the Atlantic. Once it exits, I don't think it's going to do very much. And as we've been talking about over this past weekend, there's lots of this upper level and mid-level shear going on. That's going to keep the western side of this low pressure fairly dry. Now, most of the energy that is going on right now is the southerly draw that's gaining. It still has a little bit of a connection to the Gulf of Mexico for some of that moisture, and it's actually triggering some rains and thunderstorms north and northeast of the low pressure. We saw that last night, not too long ago. It's about 5:11 a.m. now, so we saw most of that rain move through the area. Now it's off to the north and to the east. So as this low travels up the coastline, we should expect to continue to see some rains and squall-like weather with ups and downs in the winds and very inconsistent wind field. Once it exits to our north, things should start to improve because I'm watching this Bermuda high start to build back in from the east. And right now the center is somewhere over in this area. I would say it's about 1,024 millibars because the 1,020 millibar isobar is right about there. This center should drop down into this area and become more robust for the high pressure overall for the week. So once this low pressure exits, it's going to be immediately replaced with a southerly synoptic flow that's coming up from the Bermuda high. This area of low pressure here, this residual troughing, should filter down into South Carolina, where we do have some surface trough activity mixed in with the heat, and then you get these low level circulations inland. So we have lee side troughing, Piedmont troughing, inland troughing, all these working together this week to build for moderate flows. And when we talk about the moderate flows and the troughing, what we're looking for is thunderstorming to sort of build in these areas inland of South Carolina. With this southerly flow coming up from Bermuda high, we get what's called a return flow from the tops of these thunderstorms, especially when you have mid and upper level winds aloft pushing in this direction, or even westerly. Westerly is even better because that return flow goes over the ocean and back into the coast and starts what I like to call the wind wheel from the sea breezes, specifically corkscrew sea breezes, and that will involve westerly winds overnight, fading into a southerly wind for the day and building. So that's what we're looking for the week once this low exits, is moderate winds. Let's take a quick look. I want to look at the tracks that they have. So the GEFS actually, some of their models actually bring this low a little bit further inland, which will keep it weak, and then offshore into the Atlantic and then out to the east-northeast. If we look at some of the other models, the North American model, the GFDL, the WRF models, most of them are keeping this thing right along the coastline, maybe one taking it just offshore. But with the western side of this low hugging into land, we're not going to see a lot of energy being wrapped around the center of it. So especially with that drier air being pushed down in from the northwest. And once again, that's just further observation of it not being able to organize itself. The National Hurricane Center is still keeping it down to a 10% chance, and that could be based on model intensity guidance. And when we look at model intensities, this is just a projection of some of the speeds that the models are picking up on, the wind speeds. And we have two models. These are long-range models that go out and actually bring it up. And that could be because it's reading off when it exits the coastline and heads out over the Gulf Stream. It may have an opportunity to gain a little bit of strength, but with all that drier upper level air filtering down into the top of this low pressure, I don't see that happening. I think these medium resolution models might be a little bit more on point with that. And then as we get to the high resolution models that only go out 36 to 48 hours, these all keep the storm or the low pressure at a very low, a weak kind of a storm, so we're not going to see any development from it. So going back to the surface map, once again the Bermuda high ridging in from the east, that will replace what happens with the low pressure. Now as the low pressure goes up the coastline, I'm expecting the winds to possibly bend to the west below it. And we talk about lows, we have we have counterclockwise rotation with low pressures. And what happens is this low heads up the coastline. You see maybe even a northwest flow to a west flow, and then ultimately to the south flow that the Bermuda High is pushing in. So it's just going to be a bend in the wind field, and we can probably take a better look at that through the earth.nullschool.net. And let's look at the surface map. So you can see the low pressure, you can see the winds wrapping around it, you can see the northwest flow here along the coast and even westerly. And as it scoots up and over Charleston, that's what we're bound to see. Let's take a look a little higher up in the atmosphere at 500 HPA or 500 millibars and get an idea of what we're looking at. So there's the west-southwesterly jet that could reach all the way down to the surface. We see a mid-level ridge building in from the Atlantic. That means the Bermuda High is becoming more robust. It's stronger because now we have a surface high and a mid-level high working together to bring that southerly flow into the coastline. All right, so we go higher up in the atmosphere, and let's look at what the upper level jet is doing, and we can see a very, very strong flow from northwest dipping down and then back up to from the southwest, and that's above North Carolina. When we get to South Carolina, we can see these moderate upper level northwest or westerly winds really just taking the cloud tops off of this low, and that's what's keeping this whole western side of it dry. And so that's to be expected. So I want to go look at radar. You can see most of the activity, shower activity, has moved away from us. I don't think we're going to see very much more, but there's always the potential for some of this training, some of this storm activity sort of lining up along these bands to the south and training into the coastline. When I say training, I mean like one after the other. We got to keep an eye on radar for rains and squall-like conditions. SPC mesoscale analysis shows exactly where that low pressure is. It's 1,012 millibars, which makes it very weak. Infrared loop. Right now it's too dark outside to have a visible satellite, so we have to refer to the infrared loop to kind of get an idea of what the clouds are doing at this point. And once again, you can see this large area of dry air that is on the western side of the low, and you can see the cloud tops being blown off to the west and to the south. If we look at water vapor, further evidence of drier air to the western side. So that will do it for the radar loop and the low pressure. I want to get to our local level. Now, right now we're starting to see that wind sort of shift to a west-southwest. Now we are working off of a jet from last night associated with low pressure and a stationary boundary to the north. So we saw some jumpiness. We saw the gradient sort of flexing in and out. Some of these were probably involved with some rain banding and squalls earlier around between 12 and 2 a.m. or 12 and 3 a.m. I should say. Where you saw a little bit of low-level jet develop, and then nocturnal jet develop, and then it's fading out now. So we're seeing more of a little bit of a westerly flow enter the field, and that's in association with that low pressure as well. That will accentuate the westerly winds until it passes to our north, and then we'll see the southerly winds come up behind it. As far as the models go for today, let's take a look. Let's let those load. Okay, so we have the high resolution rapid refresh 3-kilometer model, this one in the red. And I really pay attention to these when you have a mesoscale storm system or any kind of low pressure, a very defined low, very defined high pressure. This model sometimes will give you a pretty exact picture. And I'm sort of in agreement right now. It actually is the only one that kicks it to the northwest besides the National Weather Service Marine forecast. And that one looks like it's sort of basing itself off of that. The National Weather Service one actually takes it to the north around the west side of the low. So it depends on where that center goes. But this is going to be the general plot in this area for today. And once that low passes, then we see a little bit of a sea breeze build later. But I think our builds are really going to happen into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, where we get that thunderstorming inland. And once the low is gone, we're going to have more of a high-pressure surface, high-pressure setup in that inland troughing where these thunderstorms develop inland. And then as that westerly wind or northwesterly wind blows the air out over the ocean, it condenses, falls, sinks, and returns back into the sea breeze circulation. And then we get this sort of a wind wheel going, and that is what gets our sea breezes up. So that's what we want. We want the southerly flow, maybe even a southwesterly flow or south-southwesterly flow, return flow in from thunderstorming to accentuate the sea breeze circulations, and then we have moderate builds. So I'm going to call for this week. I'm going to go ahead and call for today. We're going to see probably 12 to 16 knots. It's going to be a little bit on the lower end because the low is so weak. We may have a few pulses that are higher than that. especially the closer it gets. As convergence occurs right along the coastline, we may see some of that ocean energy pulse the winds up above 16 knots at times, but it's going to be pretty jumpy until it exits off to the northeast. So I'm going to call for 12 to 16 knots with some jumpiness in the wind field today. As we get into Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Wednesday we'll probably see 14 to 18 knots on a solid moderate sea breeze. Thursday looks a little bit stronger as that inland troughing profile looks better and better. And I'm going to go to the surface map to sort of get an idea of what we're looking at there. So this inland troughing for Thursday looks stronger, and we'll say 15 to 19 knots. And as we get into Friday, we'll probably back down to 14 to 18 knots unless this inland troughing profile holds. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a fairly moderate build after today. Once this low leaves the area, we could get moderate sea breezes later up near the 14 to 17 knot ranges, depending on how quickly this Bermuda high builds into the coastline and what's going on inland, because we still have a lot of dry air, but the sun hasn't come up yet, and some of this moisture, low-level circulation has not been able to fire off, so we don't know what we're looking at yet as far as that goes. What we do know is that the upper level winds, here's Jacksonville, are westerly, and Charleston, they're westerly as well in the upper levels. So when we talk about upper level winds, this is a weather balloon sounding, and the wind barbs are pointing towards the direction the wind is coming from. That's what blows these cloud tops. As we get kind of these cloud tops, the thunderheads, we see that return flow over the ocean and back into the coastline. It's kind of hard to get a profile image out of this because it's a weather balloon reading. It's a little bit complicated to understand. However, that's going to be my call for the week for the Chucktown wind report. Is going to be 12 to 16 today, and then we get moderate 14 to 18 on Wednesday, 15 to 19 on Thursday, 14 to 18 on Friday, and that will do it for the Chucktown wind report. Have a good week.